Hi everyone, we will start our APQP4Wind webinar in a few minutes. Please look into answering our survey from the start. Then we will have a good start. Be in touch. Hello everybody, and welcome to our first webinar for in APQP4Wind. And thank you for you who already have filled out the survey from the beginning, and it was how frequently do you use the APQP4Wind manual, and we can see, yeah, quite. The most of you is once a week, or so it's nice to hear. There will be a small survey more later. First of all, welcome to our first APQP4Wind webinar. We have been very much looking forward to it. My name is Henning Bak Jochumsen, and I'm chairman of the APQP4Wind board of directors, and been into the APQP4Wind last 3-4 years. The agenda for today will be first this welcome, then there will be some webinar instructions. We will make presentation about APQP4Wind Manual 1.2, a short look into the future. Then there will be time for some Q&A session. And already now, if I forget, thank you all for joining. First, short presentation of our APQP4Wind organization. I have mentioned myself from Vestas Wind System. In the board of directors, new is Rosa Maria, who is presenting LM Wind Power. Then we have Kevin Gregan, who is from GE. We have Lee Butcher from Siemens Gamesa, Kim Schmidt from KK Wind Solution, and as observer from the Wind Denmark, the CEO from Wind Denmark, Jan Hylleberg. Maybe some of you already been in touch with some of them in our secretariat, where we have Kim Nedergaard as a general manager. We have Siste, and we have Marie-Louise, each of their skilled areas. As the working group, that also were also the presenters for some of the new in the manual for today will be, there we have the group lead is Carolina from KK Wind Solution. Then we have Henker, who from Siemens Gamesa, Vinyan, who is from Vestas, René from LM, Klaus from KK, and Jessica from GE. As consultants also from the training provider who also been involved is Ivan from Biovetas, and then we have had Karen and Ben from DNV GL. Presenters later, in a minute from now, it will be Henning Henker, who is a quality engineer and APQP expert from Siemens Gamesa. And the other one will be Vinayan, who lead QC engineer within Global QC Management System and Tools at Vestas. We plan for 45 minutes. You are welcome to write questions in the chat function during the presentation, and the chat function you should find on the right side of your screen. Question that will be answered in the Q&A session, and if you want later on also to hear it again, then we will have a webinar. The webinar will be recorded and published on APQP4Wind website, together with also the PowerPoint presentation. You can also, if you write in the chat board, and if you had some problems, we have had that in the first session. We had some who couldn't hear us. Then somebody wrote there, and then you get some guidance from Marilu, who is sitting here. Okay. I will hand over now to Vinayan.
Thank you, Henning. Good morning, good afternoon all here. When we look at the new manual, version 1.2, probably you may get a question, why did we initiate this new version? So since the introduction of the first manual, that is in January 2017, many things have changed since then. We all have been in the course of implementing the APQP4Wind manual in our own industry, and we got many new ideas, input, suggestions, many things. So finally, APQP4Wind organization decided to consolidate all those last 2 years' learnings and prepare for a level up with the new manual. That is what version 1.2 now. So with all the input that we gathered in last 2 years, classified into 8 themes, and we reviewed and executed the change. It fell into 6 categories, like something related to requirement or recommendation, general addition to the manual, clarification, improvement or modification, deletion and correction part of the old manual. So we will have a bit more detailed look into those 8 themes in the coming slides. Before moving in further, soon you will have a changelog available on the website, apqp4wind.org. That will take you through all the detailed changes, page number wise, chapter wise in the new manual. So in case if you miss something, you'll always have a reference from the changelog. Coming back to the theme that we have seen in the previous slide. So first we will look into the appendix part. So what changed under appendix theme? First of all, now we have a completely new appendix for FMEA. Most of you might have seen that in the previous manual, we had appendix for PFMEA alone. Now in the new version, now we brought the complete FMEA into the appendix part. That will take you through general information guidelines related to FMEA, PFMEA, DFMEA, and also risk matrix and prioritization. So now this is going to be a part of the new manual. Another important change that we brought in risk-based approach for preventive and corrective action plan in FMEA. So this portion also now we added into the manual. So this will help the company to prioritize their action plan based on the risks to improve their process. Another important change is on the severity ranking, both in DFMEA and PFMEA. Now we're trying to differentiate between safety and compliance concern under 10 and 9. So henceforth, 10 stands for safety hazards or safety concerns, and 9 stands for non-compliance with the government regulations or other legal requirements. And this is applicable for both DFMEA and PFMEA in the new manual. Similarly, we have a few more changes under appendix category. So we'll not go very much detail here, but you can surely find in the change log. One is recommendation on NDC added now, recommendation on gauge resolution added, guideline on type 1 and type 2 MSA, how to use, when to use, and benefit of both these type added now. Clarification on 100% inspection. So many area in the manual that we refer to the 100% inspection. Now with the new manual, we make it more clear when to use it, how to use, and what condition we should apply when we implement the 100% inspection. The next one is on process capability requirement with reference to process characteristics revisited and updated into the new manual. And another, or most of the last one under appendix category, that is standardization of special characteristic terminology. So henceforth we'll have safety special characteristics, product special characteristics, and process special characteristics. These three words now standardized and used across the manual. So these are the major changes under appendix category. Then we move on to next theme, that is manual clarifications and improvement. And I request Henning to take through those changes here.
All right, thank you, Vinan. Yeah, warm welcome from my side. I'm hearable, everything's good. I can start. All good, okay. Yeah, as Vinan mentioned already, we have a lot of improvements in different sections, and especially in the manual clarification, we put a lot of effort in clarifying some open issues. For example, in the supplier relationship, we changed the wording manufacturer to the OEM. We wanted to make sure that it's almost clear, or it's already clear, that we try to describe in the manual the relationship between the supplier and the customer. So that's why we changed a little bit the little images over here. And I know that just the background team has a kind of small survey for you. So please take a time to fulfill it. All right. Okay, thank you for participating on this. I think do we see that? Okay, need to go to the next slide. To click on it. I have to comment it. Okay, I have to comment. Okay, yeah. As we can see right now, we have a lot of supplier representatives in it. So that's followed by the OEMs. So it's very interesting for us right now, because we have similar rates in the first meeting this morning. So very interesting to see that. We will see what the future brings. We will check it after that. And now we are jumping back into the presentation. All right. Okay, let's go to the next slide. Of course, we did some changes, especially on the PQP. The PQP, the product quality plan, is something what actually reached a higher level on attention. What do I mean with that? PQP is something what we found out is a kind of guiding tool, a kind of guiding document in the whole qualification process. So that's why we think if you use PQP as a kind of guiding tool, it will make your life much easier as it was in the past. So that's why we put a lot of improvement, for example, in the different templates. When you check, for example, in the workbook, we added some more lines and added some more comments to that. In the kickoff meeting, we were actually asked very often, hey, how can we really set up a kind of kickoff meeting? So when we meet the first time with the supplier, or the customer and the supplier meets the first time, how shall we really proceed with it? And there were some hiccups in the past, what we tried to clarify with a kind of checklist, what we improved here and what we set it up or added to the manual. Actually, to make sure that the people have an easy entrance, an easy step into the first, if you want, negotiations between the customer and the supplier. As we followed then with some recommended actions, for example, especially in the team facility commitment, we added especially the run at rate calculation to it, because it was discussed very often how we can really make sure that our suppliers will somehow follow the process, and how they make sure that they actually can deliver all the material what's supposed to come in a special due date. So that's why this recommended actions, or this kind of recommended documentation, is right now included under 2.3 team feasibility commitment. In further steps, we were often asked, okay, guys, when you using the word can or may or shall or should, what is actually behind it? So what is actually the definition? What does it really mean when you have in your manual the wording should or shall or may or can? So a clarification is what we added to our glossary. And here you actually can see what the definition of this 4 words is. Because, to clarify a little bit the position, what is actually mandatory when you see should, or what is a kind of up to the negotiation level, then you have a kind of can. And the next thing, just only some headlines, no slides for that. We, of course, added some link information in our manual, so that you have an easy access from the manual to our webpage, where we put the link, for example, to the workbook and to the analysis tool in it. Hopefully, everybody of you had already the chance to review our webpage, because there are so many interesting information on it, and especially the workbook and the analysis tool. I really highly can recommend to go through it and make it to your own. One small item, one small topic we discussed was really worth to be shown up here in this presentation. It was just only a small information in the manual, but we added it to it, and we tried to introduce you to the thinking, because according to 9001. We try to continuously improve our systems, and especially our quality management system. So that's why we added one objective to it, and this is actually avoiding problem or the failure repetition. Because in my opinion, you actually can see on failure repetitions if a quality management is working successfully or not, and that's why we found it worth to be added to the manual. On the next part, we of course changed according to all this, what we changed in the wording. We of course changed accordingly the graphics and the tables. And one of the most important things we have in the responsibility matrix, we deleted. If you take your attention right now to the right area, you can see that we changed the 2 columns in this actual or the current version. We changed it from actually 3 columns. It was in the beginning, but as we found out that the last 2 columns are equal and just the same, we said, okay, it makes no sense. And for getting more overview and more clarification, we deleted this, so there's no information missing now. One of the important things is something we had several requesters, hey, can you define somehow different areas, like, for example, prototype, O-series, and series phases? So we called them prototype stage, the O-series stage, and the series stage. We added this to the APQP4Wind framework, only to make sure that, yeah, it is necessary for some organizations to have a due date. And you can see actually here on the border between the prototype series, for example, and the O-series stage, that there's supposed to be any kind of due date where a product can ripe. So that means actually it can be developed to a certain point. And when it reached the level, a kind of due date, then it will go over to the next phase. And this was important for us to add this somehow to this diagram. Of course, some relation diagram, relation diagram was added because we several were facing to the problems that some of our members could not really see how is the relationship between all the different important documents, like, for example, the FMEAs, the control plan, and all the other small items, like, for example, MSA. So that's why we added this kind of graph in it to show a little bit the relationship and maybe a kind of workflow, so that you can see the requirements from the customer coming from the top and going through certain steps until you will reach a certain level. And you will find this actually very on the very end of our manual. So then from the layout-wise, we changed several things, like, for example, some headlines and the faces. So we changed the numbering a little bit to organize it a little bit different, so that there's more clarification in the whole manual, so that it is easy to read. And what we found a little bit interesting, especially for the structure, there was a request from one company to say, hi guys, can we see somehow actually the link between the workbook, the manual, and the different chapters? So what belongs to where, and where can I find different information? So what belongs together? So we found this as a really beneficial table to sit down, and we added this is only a small part right now from the whole table. We added this to the manuals so that you can easily find the information. For example, if you're looking for control plans, or you're looking for the PSW, where is it actually mentioned in the manual? Where is it mentioned in the tool? Or what kind of chapter number does it have? For the list of templates, we added a new appendix. This is what was actually Appendix 5. And what we did, we removed all other templates out of the manual because we thought, in case we have some changes, for example, in the workbook, we always had to align the manual to it. So that's why this decision was made, that we said, okay, get out all the templates out of the manual, because it is available in the workbook. And yeah, we added only one little appendix, and this is the Appendix 5 now. For all what I said before, no more templates in the APQP4Wind manual, and of course, all the chapter numbers are prefixed right now with the phases. The phases are according to the framework, the APQP4Wind framework, what I showed already several slides before. Okay. The last thing was actually PPAP scoping and the pod submission warrant, so PSW. Like I mentioned just in the beginning, and this is for us very important, that we added information about the PQP in this table. So it was missing in the 1.1 version. So we have it right now in the 1.2 version available, as we changed it in the workbook as well. So means, like I said, the high importance of the PQP came up right now. And as you can see, when it is mandatory according to the high risk or to the medium risk and the low risk, it is not required right now. Yeah, the last thing, we did a change on some required documentation, or actually some recommended documentation, especially as we heard from several areas that the safety regulations, government regulations are interesting right now. So the safety data sheets are added right now to this, to the information. So that means we gave here a kind of link, a hint to it, to add or to talk about, especially in the specification review, about this different kind of very important documents. They are needed. And of course, there's a small link to the PSW as well. So I highly recommend to review this kind of information, because this will help you to go a little bit easier through the whole system. Last but not least, we of course had some great support from some English speakers or English tongues in the background. So as you can hear that we both, or actually our team was not filled with a lot of English speakers. So that's why we really appreciate the support from all the natives in the native tongues, English and American English, of course. So you will find a kind of adjustment in the manual, sometimes according to the regular American or British English. And we, of course, had added some information about the logos and about the companies. They are joining us already on the background, actually on the backpack of this of the manual. What brings me right now to the end of my presentation, and I like to hand it over the microphone now back to Henning. I'm always impressed how many Hennings we have in this team here. So thank you for listening to me, and have a great day so far.
Thank you. I will shortly look into the future. As you can see now, the updated APQP4Wind manual version 1.2 is now available. And I think we already got a question earlier that yes, you can buy the manual, but and you can do it through the training providers, and we have link from APQP4Wind, our homepage, and we will of course suggest you to also, if you're not already in a company who have a membership, then please look into it. Still, we have this webinar open for companies who is not a member, but in the future ones, it will be that it is the members who can join these sessions and to be updated. Manual and Toolbox, we have planned that it will be translated into Chinese, and our plan is that it will be released in end of October together with the Chinese wind power fair. We beside now that we have these updates for the manual, we also there will be some updates of the toolbox and the workbook, and these will be released tomorrow on our homepage. We have a next step is also that we will start looking into a roadmap for further development of the manual and the toolbox. And here, of course, we are very open always to hear from you, that you share what are the needs, etc. So we know when the next version will come or what are you missing. We can look into that. And now we are ready for the Q&A.
Yeah, so this is Marilyn from APQP4Wind. I will present the questions, and then the clever experts Henning, and Vinyan will answer the questions. So the first question we actually got was from Raman. Perez if any training will be available in Mexico in the near future for group or sites.
When we talk about trainings, you can see through our homepage, there's a link also to the training providers when the public trainings are. I know that already been training in Mexico, but it has been, I think, what's called an in-house trainings. So that's also a possibility if there's not, and I don't remember that there's planned a training in Mexico yet. But you can contact the training providers.
Okay, and then Marta, she asks, have you considered to include more detailed guidelines on how to run the design for manufacturing, assembly, and service?
Yeah, that's a good question. You can find it maybe from when the changelog available that there are some inclusion to the design for manufacturing, assembling, and service part also. And current changes are pertaining to considering the complete value chain in the design. And also, when it comes to design, I also specified under DFME and PFME, so specifically on the DFME part. So what are the things that we need to consider while designing? But even if you expect something specific that can be included even in the future, that you can share with the email ID that mostly Marie-Louise will provide at the end, and it is available there on the website as well. So you can provide those input directly to the email.
Yeah. And Anderson, he asked, regarding the spreadsheet toolkit, will it be possible to hide where not used, example for low risk level?
This question, it looks it's more connected with workbook, because where we need to, there are some questions generally comes in, can we do some customization, hide some sheets? That part still it is not available because that functionality, some of the functionality even in the recent workbook added, we have not included hiding option of any sheet as of now. But that will be surely reviewed along with other team members during our regular review.
Yeah, and then Elena, she asks, is the new APQP4Wind manual defined? Who will decide what is the level of risk will be applicable to the qualified product, low, medium, or high?
That portion you can find it in the manual. Actually, it says either by customer or supplier. So now in the manual, it says as a minimum. And if the customer says or identifies something as high, then as a minimum should be considered as high. On the other hand, if customer says it's low, but as per the supplier's design or the risk assessment, it falls under high, then you can treat it as high. Because this manual says the minimum requirement.
Yeah. And then we have a question from Jim. Could you elaborate on your interpretation of high risk, medium risk, and low risk with regards to PPAP submissions, product-specific risk?
Right now, we don't have that elaboration part in the manual. Probably that is a good input even when you make the next version or when we have some other way of clarifying the point. But right now, it is up to the customer and supplier to follow their own guideline to classify whether it is high, medium, or low.
And then we have a question from Sandro related to run at rate. Will there be provided a template to be used and explaining how to execute it?
Yeah, the training. Normally, we have this as a kind of point for negotiation between the supplier and the customer. So if the customer has his own templates and he really wants to see the results somewhere on a kind of document, he normally provides this kind of document then to the supplier. Most of the time, my experience is most of the suppliers, they do have their own documentation available, and they will normally align to the documentation from the customer. So, like I said, it's a kind of it's always a kind of negotiations between what kind of documentation shall be transferred and what kind of information shall be transferred on which format. So here in this case, I would highly recommend to talk to either one. So it means if you're a customer, I would highly recommend to talk to your supplier and ask him, okay, what kind of documents do you use in case he does not work with any kind of template already. The customer maybe should provide something. We right now in APQP4Wind do not have this kind of template right now available, but it is on our list, making sure that we will have maybe in the future something like that as a kind of recommendation to use it, like we did it, for example, for the FMEAs as well.
Yeah, thank you, Henning.
Mm-hmm.
Then the Ravindran is asking, is there any specific things related to control panels manufacturing, assembly, wiring, and test, and it should follow?
Not in specific right now. We are using or we are treating manufacturers for the control panels in the same way like we do handle all the other suppliers and all the other customers. Of course, there are special requirements and special regulations for different areas, and especially when I see here the word wiring, then I'm testing about that. I know that there are special tests, for example, in the background, but they should be mentioned, of course, for example, in the PPAP. And they will be negotiated between the customer and the supplier in the same way as, for example, other companies. They, for example, have heat treatment or they have welding areas. They have their own specialties in their queues. So that's why the answer here is right now, no, there are no special things in it until the customer is not demanding or asking for any kind of special. I think specified things. I think here's somebody's asking here for requirements or regulations.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And Tony Cho, a new version FMEA released from AIAG. How about the FMEA in APQP4Wind? It will upgrade to new version as well?
Yeah, we had the same question this morning session, and we gave the answer in this way that we said, we know there's a change right now in AIAG, and we have to negotiate or we have to discuss it internally on our level. But right now, especially my feeling is, and I always try to convince the people in this direction that I say, okay, we need to be more independent right now from AIAG in direction to being an independent wind industry organization. And especially when you look, for example, for the automotive industry is doing mass production and we are doing kind of sequence or kind of small production, small parts production. There is a kind of discrepancy right now in the FMEAs. So we checked this already, we looked in it already, and have to have in the next weeks, we have some workshops to figure out what is really the content of this, what AIAG changed, and it is really important for us in APQP4Wind. I don't think so, but it will be an outcome in the next couple of months from the different work groups when the experts were sitting and talking about that.
Yeah, thank you, Henning. And then Marta asks, while working with the workbook, we have had some speed performance issues of the sheet because of the uploading option at the Excel sheet. Have you got any other inputs on this regard?
No, we don't get any specific input on the speed part of it. So suppose if it exists, then it looks mostly related to some local computer settings or the version that we use it. Or if it is still exists, you can reach out to the same support email ID so that we will also review internally from all the peers.
And then Anderson, he asked, the CPK values remain the same in the manual version. Process capability analysis.
Yes, there is a change when it comes to the CPK values compared to the older version of the manual. So the major change in the older manual, there is a differentiation between existing process, new process. Now it has been changed now. This is going to be only one process, but CPK values are going to be different for safety special characteristics, product special characteristics, and process special characteristics. So this change, you can find it in the new manual and also in the change log.
And then Marta actually follows up on this question. Are the CPK values coming from classic automotive industry definition? I find them hard to comply with when you're running a manual process for cut and drill, for example.
When it comes to the CPK value, it is not directly coming from the auto industry, because that is again based on statistical study and experience. It is gradually established as a minimum requirement. So we don't see big difference in the values, but yes, as I said, for the previous question, there are changes in the new manual, but it will not differentiate between any manual operation or automated process. But surely will be considered.
Yeah, and then Ramon has asked a very short question. Risk analysis is or will be part of the PFMEA?
If I rightly understand the question, so we are just looking at the risk and prioritization part of this presentation. So in the new manual, you'll find area that talks about the risk-based approach and how to calculate risk number and risk priority number, and there are definitions available. So based on that, it gives you a table by looking at which you can select or prioritize your action plan. Apart from that, it will not give any other tool or any other guideline to do any risk assessment.
Yeah, and now we are running into the final minutes of the webinar. So if you have any last questions, please ask now. And before you leave, please remember to ask at the survey if you found this useful. The last one we have is from Sandro. Some companies consider FMEA as intellectual property, maybe. How to deal with this condition inside APQP4Wind?
Yeah, I think this is the old common discussion what talks about confidentiality of information from the different companies. Well, I know, especially from automotive, I was 15 years in automotive. There was always a kind of general agreement or gentleman agreement that, of course, you can look into into the FMEAs, for example, as a customer. You can always look into the FMEAs from a supplier. but only for have a visual look into it. So that means no copies, no booklets, or no hard copy or something like this. So what we normally had in the past was that we invited the customer to us for a kind of FMEA session. And then, especially when we had any kind of issues in the last month, for example, we showed just from our documentation, we showed just this little sequence to our customers, and normally they agreed to it, and they said, okay, yes, we can understand that especially FMEAs are a pool of confident information. So that's why we see that you handled the risk properly and everything is fine. So like I said in the beginning already, it's always a kind of negotiations between the supplier and the customer, how you really treat or handle this really sensible situation. It is always a kind of, like I said, gentleman agreement, has to do with experience, of course, with trust. So that means if I have a supplier who's working in a good condition, and I have a good relationship to this to the customer or to the supplier, then you can actually say, we can look into the different informations, and sometimes we can keep secrets. There's no mandatory exchange with FMEAs right now, and we cannot really recommend this. So again, gentleman agreement between customer and supplier. Yes, of course, he can see the document. The customer can still see the documentation. He can come and review it, but the supplier should not send out any kind of copies or emails or something like this with the content of an FMEA.
Yes, time is running, time is gone. Thank you for all of you who have been joining. It has been good, and thank you for the good questions. If there are still questions that you didn't get or you find it in the future, you're always welcome to share with APQP4Wind, and they will bring it to the group, who can then answer. Otherwise, we hope that you also will use to fill out how usual you think this webinar is, because we like to improve all the time. And yes, there will be a sort of question: is there another meeting scheduled? Not yet, but it will absolutely not be the last one. Yes. Thank you. Have a nice day.